As a result of that work, in one county, they saw a 98% reduction in youth suicide and suicide attempts over the course of a decade. They saw a 50% reduction in juvenile justice system involvement, an increase in graduation rates, a decrease in birth to teen parents. Different really great outcomes all happened at once because by approaching and really tackling that root cause of trauma, because trauma really is a root cause driver of so many different problems that we have in our society.
As an ongoing mission of Penji to help those who help others, we want to offer a 15% discount to anyone interested in using our services watching this video. Signing up for Penji gets you unlimited access to our vetted team of graphic design experts. And if you sign up for our services using the code CTIPP15, all of the money that you are saving will go to CTIPP to help those in need. Thank you. All right, everyone. Welcome to Unified Purpose, the podcast where we share inspiring tales of compassion, resilience, and community spirit. I'm your host, Shannon, Penji's Partnership Coordinator, and I'm joined here with a very special guest, Jesse Kohler. Founder of the Campaign for Trauma-Informed Policy and Practice, Jesse has actually seen me in a very vulnerable state previously. Sometimes I personally have a lot of trouble sustaining a feeling of hope when a lot of bad things are happening in the world, but his genuine care about people as a whole had me quite literally crying on our previous call. So I'm really excited to talk to him more about his organization today because I definitely think that what he's doing is really important and maybe it'll tug at your heartstrings too. So thank you for being on with me today.
Appreciate it, Shannon. Really quickly, just to give shout out where it's due, I am not the founder of CTIPP. I just get to serve as the executive director.
Oh, that's completely my...
I am the founder of a different organization called the Change Campaign that loans me out to serve as executive director of the Campaign for Trauma-Informed Policy and Practice. But it's all sorts of confusing when you get multiple organizations involved, but I feel very privileged to get to do the work that I do.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm sorry for misspeaking. I think I might have confused it with your previous ones.
Not at all.
With us before.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. All right. Well, thank you for clearing that up. So can you just tell us a little bit more about what inspired the creation of this organization? And I know even though you're the executive director, do you know like the story behind everything?
Yeah. So I'm happy to talk about the founding, and I think that your introduction to it was actually, or to this episode was really relevant, right? Where there's a lot of hopeful stuff that goes on in the world around us when, we're working with folks or working in communities. There's also a lot of really troubling things that are going on in the world when we turn on the news, also when we do work in communities and with people, that the world is far from perfect, which gives us a lot of good work to do. But the Campaign for Trauma-Informed Policy and Practice was founded by leaders in the trauma-informed space with really two main goals in mind. One was recognizing that there wasn't enough advocacy voice around trauma-informed care at a policy level, specifically at like the federal policy level. But there's also opportunity at state, local, tribal levels, and that infusing trauma-informed approaches into our thoughts on policymaking are really important, and also supporting trauma-informed approaches for advocates themselves, because we need to have a groundswell of support. And so to really create an organization that was focused on creating the container to help this movement move forward was a key part of where, again, leaders in the field and of the trauma-informed movement saw that there was a missing piece to the trauma-informed movement, which was on that policy and advocacy side when we were founded back in 2015. And then the other reason, or like where I say that we're rooted in our founding, was a recognition that even the trauma-informed work that was taking place kind of happened in these silos where there was work going on in trauma-informed education, in healthcare settings, in the criminal legal system, and so on. But there wasn't really a vision for what a fully trauma-informed society would look like, where there was collaboration across sectors, that would really be a transformative growth from where we are now to some future that is so much better that it looks almost fundamentally differently in the way that our services actually operate in more trauma-informed ways. And so we were really founded to try and support the development of a vision as well and co-create that with folks all across the country. So that way, it's not just us kind of telling folks what to do, but really supporting a more trauma-informed process in envisioning what that future looks like.
Could you give an example of what trauma-informed care kind of looks like? I guess I know that you guys focus on policy, but what is specifically, what does that look like after the policy is passed, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so it depends, right? It's going to look different based on context. Different communities have different populations, needs, resources, desires. That trauma-informed care is not like a one-size-fits-all sort of block. I think that one of the most powerful examples of policy or executive action that then got mobilized to support communities and had tremendous outcomes can be seen from work of the Washington State Family Policy Council, which ran a program that there's a Robert Wood Johnson report on it called the Self-Healing Communities Model. But they ran a program from 1994 to 2011 where they really embedded like community-led trauma-informed approaches in the middle or at the beginning in 1998, 1997, when the ACEs study, the Adverse Childhood Experiences study results were published, which showed in incredible ways the ways in which early childhood adversity could create lifelong health behavioral sort of consequences across the lifespan. The ways in which developmental adversity impact life course trajectories was really powerfully stated. There was this dual approach around trauma-informed approaches and systems thinking that then, I think it was 49 communities across the state engaged in these processes that, again, each community kind of chose different avenues, but it was a layered learning process with sustained support and educational opportunities that continued to support communities in developing different plans of action and then collecting data, asking the right questions of data to see whether communities were on the right track and learning from one another. As a result of that work, in one county, they saw a 98% reduction in youth suicide and suicide attempts over the course of a decade. They saw a 50% reduction in juvenile justice system involvement, an increase in graduation rates, a decrease in birth to teen parents. Different really great outcomes all kind of happened at once because while it sounds a little bit amorphous, by approaching and really tackling that root cause of trauma, they were able to bring down several rates all at once because trauma really is a root cause driver of so many different problems that we have in our society. And very powerfully, while the human side of this work is why I think we should all care about what is being done, there was a 35x return on investment as a result of the policy work that was being done because of the cost avoidance to the systems that would have otherwise had to support child welfare system involvement, juvenile justice system involvement, all of these big costs to our society. They actually created a $1.1 billion cost avoidance to the state. And so we see this economic feasibility as well as this human, this better approach to human services as a result of the work that was done there after the financial collapse in 2008 or 2009, that Great Recession. We saw the policy levers change a couple years after, and that's why the program stopped in 2011. That's obviously a very disappointing outcome and a little bit confusing, but we really hope to see more policies like that, as well as others that do go deeper into educational supports and healthcare system reform and so on.
I definitely resonate with the idea that you're explaining about the amount of money that you save keeping people out of these systems, because I I also talked previously with, I think I mentioned this to you on our call previously about Cheryl Ann Wadlington from Evolure House. She was telling me about the amount of money that it is to keep children in the juvenile justice system, and how just having organizations, like putting money towards organizations that are meant to keep them out, or like even the foster care system. Like there's so many different, like there's institutions that are meant to help, but they don't do what they're aimed to do. And there's so many preventative measures that we can do to keep them out of those systems. So that's amazing.
Yeah, that patchwork policy that we see that oftentimes pays for things further downstream is currently kind of the paradigm that we generally take. But we know that that's inefficient. Like, our systems are unsustainable, and it's difficult to measure prevention. It is impossible in some ways to measure what doesn't happen. It's much easier to measure that which does, but there's another powerful story. And I think that that's going to get into some of the marketing conversation that we'll get into. But like, there's another powerful example in child welfare systems. And, you know, we're trying to shift the language around the quote unquote child welfare system to hopefully be more about child and family supporting systems. But I've heard there's a story of a family that had 4 kids, and they originally had 2 cars, but one of the cars broke down. And so they had 4 kids in one car for the family. And the 2 parents developed this routine with their one car where they would drop the kids off who, I think it was like a high school, 2 were in high school, 2 were in elementary school, let's say, something like that. They would go in shifts because of the size of the car and the capacity to manage, where the family would take the first 2 sets of kids to school, come back, take the second set of kids to school every day. And somehow a neighbor, somebody saw that these 2 kids were home alone before school started, and CPS was called. And the approach was, with child welfare system involvement, if those kids were separated from their families, which we know happens disproportionately when poverty gets viewed as neglect, and then we see disproportionate separation, particularly in Black and brown families and other, you know, historically marginalized and oppressed sort of communities. The approach is generally going to result in a cost of like $60,000 to $80,000 per kid per year for a problem that could have been solved with $15,000 if someone had just gotten the family a second car that would have allowed for everybody to go to school. There are ways to avoid a lot of the costs that our current approaches to problem solving would be more efficient, and they create huge problems on the back end when we create that kind of stress for families. When we are like, there are huge problems in the fundamental paradigms and ways that we currently address policy and practice that we're really trying to create better, more sustainable solutions for, that allow for people to thrive, create less harm.
Do you think that a lot of a reactive approach rather than a proactive approach is due to a lot of people's misled mindsets about people in poverty? Because I was like thinking about how like a lot of people are against like welfare and different things, like because they see it as like a handout, like, oh, you should work harder, oh, you should do this, blah, blah, blah. But do you think that I think that a lot of people are more reactive than proactive, because they think that if they do something proactive, then if they're not seeing an immediate change, then they think that it's not something that works.
I think that there's there are multiple layers, and I don't know how much is intentional versus unintentional. I think that in the United States, there is this notion of a pick yourself up by your bootstraps sort of mentality, which the thing that I hear a lot is it's impossible to do that if you don't even have boots, right? Like, I mean, there are like fundamental assumptions that we don't even provide base layers of support that would truly allow for people to thrive, because we know through a trauma-informed approach, if you don't have stable housing, stable relationships, stable food, as just like going up Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we're not able to access our prefrontal cortex. We are forced to live in more of a day-to-day sort of existence that doesn't allow for us to have the long-term thought of, I'm going to get a job, I'm going to be able to, just go hand out resumes, because you just need to survive day to day. If we're not providing baseline layers of support, and we've seen this time and time again in different pilot studies where there's universal basic income and supports for families, that has tremendous outcomes for children, the adults, and the family unit as a whole. And, so I think that there's a lot of misguided assumptions that people are quote unquote broken, people are quote unquote bad. And we need to realize, again, the fundamental shift in trauma-informed care, one of the ways that it's often described is that the question that we ask changes from what's wrong with these people to what's happened to people, and really starting to understand that life circumstances, environments impact the way that we operate and navigate the world that we live in, and that we can, inarguably to me, we can do a lot better and a lot more to provide supports for people that allow everyone to thrive, right? Which gets down to CTIPP's basic mission.
So is this, to be more clear on the policy that you do, is it more centered in the people experiencing this trauma, or the people that work with people experiences this trauma, or both?
Everything.
That's incredible.
Yeah, we have a 16-dimension policy vision that, would look from before someone's born, how do we set up healthy communities, healthy families, and support that. Every system someone may touch along the way, as well as those that work within the systems, until end-of-life care, bereavement care. How do we take care of those who are left behind? And that's working toward that trauma-informed society where we're looking comprehensively. Because we are currently pretty small, our focus is primarily around cross-sector community coalitions right now, and trying to support advocates that have expertise and passion in these various other areas as we try to build the whole movement. But as our organization hopefully grows, we will be able to provide more expertise, more support, more leadership and thought leadership to co-create and move the movement forward on all of those issues and more as we continue to learn and grow as time moves forward.
So something that I've run into in the past working for nonprofits in Philly is a lot of people don't know about services that are available to them. Since you guys are actively working on policy that will be new to people, and a lot of people don't have access or don't have the time to be informed or look into things that are able to help them, how do you reach these people? How do you, in a way, I guess, market the policies that are now approved?
Yeah, so that's where partnership becomes huge, right? Where we see the best vision for our work, I think is us as a national organization that have connections with statewide organizations as well as other national organizations that then have contact with community organizations and coalitions, because people engage with life not at this macro level that policy oftentimes happens with, but in the communities that they live. And that's why we want to really support coalitions that are driving neighborhood activities, that are sharing information with residents and creating culturally humble and community-led approaches that are really engaging and creating conditions of empowerment for people in communities. And so if and when policies pass, it would be through our network and partnerships that we would be able to spread the word as it currently is. I'm sure that if we were much bigger, we could have massive marketing campaigns, that's just not possible on a budget of a few $100,000. Like, it's just, we're tightly scrapped right now and trying to grow. But I think that vision of continuing to develop partnerships that are connected to create an infrastructure that reaches communities all across the country, to keep people updated on opportunities, to, those organizations are oftentimes a lot better at sharing what resources do exist, what services are available for people than we would be able to at a national level. And so being able to have all of that in one place and sort of creating an umbrella for the movement as a whole, I think is a gap, like you're saying, that our country needs, that the world needs, that as we grow, we are hopeful to be able to step more and more into.
That's really great to hear, because I know like a lot of people, I think a lot of good things do get passed every once in a while. And I think that a lot of people just don't know about the things that are available to them. Like, there were, when I had previously worked with an organization that worked with the homeless, there were all of these things that they would have access to, but they didn't know about, that we would like pass flyers around. Like, for example, like there's a way to get a free or like a very extremely low priced ID for yourself, which you need most of the time to apply for a job, for all these things. And like, there are so many people that don't have identification. And so many people just had no idea that this was a thing at all. And I didn't even know it was a thing. So I think that that working with the community is really great, because I think also sometimes if people even do hear about something from the government, they don't necessarily trust it because it's a system that's been against them. So hearing it from people that they do trust is really great.
Having those trusted messengers is huge. And then the other piece that we hope, in addition to synthesizing information and sharing resources and knowledge that are coming out, we hope that we're also able to mobilize more people through this approach as to what matters in their community, where as advocates, as constituents for specific elected officials, I may live in DC, but other than the DC representative, my proximity creates opportunities for me to meet. But representatives, senators don't have any vested interest in me having a meeting with them unless they have an interest in trauma-informed policy, and we're seeing more and more of that. But having constituents reach out to their elected officials is the best way to move policy. If we can show that these are key priorities for any given community that a representative is elected to represent the interests of, then having more people being able to reach out, that's the best way to move policy forward. And so that's where that movement building piece and the trauma-informed approaches to advocacy that we are trying to build at a grassroots level all across the country becomes so important, because that's how we're going to move policy at all of these levels to really advance, connecting people who are all advocating, and have similar priorities is really important, and creates feelings of connection and belonging that we know are so powerful at an individual level. And then at a macro level, it's going to also help to build a movement that advances that transformative policy vision that we've been discussing.
I saw on your website that you guys also do like events, like workshops and different things like that for trauma-informed, I guess not policy, but
yeah. Do
you have the same strategy for organizing those events?
Yeah, those are
getting them out there.
Those were that's been an evolving tool of CTIPPs, where it started in 2018. It's always been open, free to the public. Anybody can join. Starting in 2018, one of our founders, Dan Press, who unfortunately passed away, the Press On Pro initiative it carries his name and his legacy. It was a big part of how he saw the work needing to advance beyond what his life alone would be able to see. But it started with just calls where he would share updates from the Hill with advocates, and they could ask him questions. And then during COVID, it kind of evolved to where we were having other people sharing what they were doing in different contexts. We had the Building the Movement workshop series, which was a huge haul where we shared across different silos and dimensions of society how trauma-informed care is being applied. And then CTIPP Can more recently became, we were developing reports and toolkits and guides that we would then report on and facilitate conversations. And now we're moving to launching our CTIPP Can stands for our Community Advocacy Network. But we're really going to lean into trying to train in trauma-informed approaches to advocacy and creating coalitions of advocates that are, again, approaching different policies at different levels to where their passion and interests align, but carrying forward this trauma-informed approach to really model the model as we build the movement, because we think that that is a necessary component to creating a transformative framework, is that we need to be trauma-informed in our approaches if we are going to achieve trauma-informed transformation. And so those are open, free to the public, and we have those once a month, and that has resulted over the last 6 years in organic network growth for those calls. And we'll continue to, again, do more and more as our as our capacity expands. And then the other place is we work with communities and have a community of practice once a year, and additional work with communities on building population level resilience to the impacts of disasters, but in advance of disasters occurring. Our goal is, again, to work toward more of a preventative framework, whether that's an extreme weather event, mass violence or terrorist attacks, other disasters. There are frameworks that we can support communities in developing, again, community-led, trauma-informed coalitions that are promoting, we call them transformational resilience coordinating networks, but that's a long name. And so working to support the development of these community coalitions and having those coalitions learning from each other is another resource that we offer. And so we hope as we continue to grow to be able to provide more and more support for what trauma-informed care looks like in different settings, learning from people that are doing the work, promoting trauma-informed advocacy and action at every level, reaching down into the grassroots, because we know that healing happens in the context of healthy relationships over time. And so making sure that while we work at a national level, our vision is supporting, in my own life, it was a coach or a few coaches who at my toughest time created a relationship and opportunities for me that led to healing through some really difficult life circumstances, and making sure that we are supporting healthy relationships at every level through systems that can build upon one another to create a healthier society. I know that I got way more meta than the original question of the programming.
Okay.
We'll continue to do more and more calls that are trying to work at all levels to support that sort of activity.
I think that was all really important. No need. I love when people are passionate about things. That was, you actually answered my follow-up question within your answer. So that's no problem with me. But I think that's wonderful. And I think that having just policy, I think the people that you're helping might not be able to see exactly what you're doing directly, but I think having those programs are really lovely. And it's also I think it works on the thing that we talked about earlier of building trust. If they like these programs, then they might also trust you to be able to advocate for them on a grander scale.
Yeah,
which is really great.
And we hope to advocate with them and support uplifting their voice into the advocacy process as well. But we hope so.
Awesome. We had actually talked previously about the Healing Cities Act as well as the Love Act. Can you share a bit more about those plans?
Yeah, I talked about Washington State, but Baltimore is another great example of trauma-informed policy, where it was after a school shooting. It was 3 young people in particular went to city council after a school shooting and said, like, don't penalize us. Don't put more metal detectors in schools. Don't put more police in schools. Like, you keep taking that approach every time that there's a shooting, and it doesn't work. We need resources to heal, support our healing. And that was the motivation over a couple years. There was a particular city council member whose name is Jesse Kohler, and he was a former teacher who, with that advocacy, movement by the young people, kind of took that on as a pilot project. And eventually the Elijah Cumming Healing Cities Act was passed in Baltimore. I believe that it was 2020 that it was officially passed, and it spread training to public agencies and is working to coordinate and align public agencies to, again, remove those silos and better coordinate services within the city. And out of the work of that, we CTIPP has been engaged in a project that's trying to support expansion of healing cities beyond just Baltimore, but create learning communities in cities that are promoting this. And I'm from Philadelphia. I'm a proud Philadelphian, and through the Change campaign, I'm helping to now work to spread healing cities into Philadelphia, see what that could look like in Philly. And that inspired what we talked about, which was the LOVE Act, the Lowering Overdose and Violence Epidemics Act, which would create cross-sector community coalition grants. It's model legislation. It hasn't passed. I hope that it does. But in theory, the model legislation would authorize a grant program to fund essentially neighborhood coalitions, where Philadelphia is a city of neighborhoods. And so you can't just have a one-size-fits-all approach to what trauma-informed approaches would look like in every neighborhood, because, again, it depends on the population's needs, resources, and desires. And then a broad education and engagement campaign and coordination and alignment across city agencies. There's a lot of wonderful trauma-informed work going on in Philadelphia. I think that one of the challenges that hopefully the LOVE Act is able to fit into and we're able to build from is that there's a lot of competition, because there are so many people and organizations doing this work. And frankly, philanthropy and government can oftentimes create a competitive landscape where people are working I understand it, running a small nonprofit, there's scarcity out there in terms of how many resources are available. But one of the principles for a truly trauma-informed approach is collaboration. And we need to create a landscape in which we're able to collaborate, where there's mission alignment, and that would help to move a lot of these practices and supports forward much further than I think we currently see them getting. There's a lot of great work being done, and I think that we can see that there's a lot of opportunity for it to be done even better. And so as we continue to work with Healing Cities, trying to move that into Philadelphia, LOVE Act as model legislation is one potential tool to be able to do so. But, we hope to learn and support continued growth and development in the city of Philadelphia and beyond.
That's awesome.
It's a wonderful coalition. There's just so many really great people, and we know so much of what can work and what has worked, and which creates a lot of hope. I think in our last conversation that you alluded to, right? There is a lot of hope for where a lot of the problems that pull at our heartstrings and make us passionate about the work that we do and give us a tremendous amount of meaning and purpose in continuing to move forward through the toughest times. I continue to see so many different opportunities and examples of where we can make things a lot better, and it kind of benefits everybody, right? We just have to do things a little bit differently, which is hard, which can be difficult, but that doesn't mean it isn't worth doing.
I completely agree. I think that a lot of people, when they've experienced so much pain in their lives, that it's really hard not to be hopeful when you feel like everything's against you, and to know that organizations like yours are working to make that better is so good to hear.
Yeah, I wish there was so much more that we can do right now, and I hope that someday we're able to support all the work that needs to be done.
I appreciate that. And it was really, it was actually really interesting. And I'm happy that you brought up about nonprofits kind of, for nonprofit policies, kind of competing on a government level. I know that that's really tough because it's you divvying up resources for causes that are probably all important. That's really messed up.
The system, I think, is structured in a fundamentally flawed way. In a lot of ways that we see are unsustainable and minimize impact from, or at least don't limit how much we actualize maximal impact, may be a better way to say, because again, there's a lot of wonderful impact that does exist, but I think that we can also see that the world needs to go a lot further. And back to the conversation of investing more in prevention, I think that if we're able to fundamentally change the way that we see that, we would have more opportunity for abundance and collaboration, rather than the current conditions of it's really hard to meet your annual budget and pay your people and have the capacity to deliver the resources and services that you need to. And we also need to be trauma-informed in the way that we are doing the work, and paying people living wages is a necessary component to that. So it's a broader problem than pointing at any one person or organization. But I think that, finding ways to rethink the way that our systems fundamentally operate and are built upon is possible, necessary. It can be iterative, and we can get better and better over time. But it is a problem, to your point.
I've personally seen the funding model of Philadelphia. I would say that I don't really agree with where certain pools of money go.
I will just say that I see tremendous opportunity for growth.
That would be really wonderful. So a mission of Penji personally is to be able to help organizations like yours, which is why we have our Penji for Nonprofit organization. I was wondering if you would be able to speak on how it's helped you in the past, since you've used us.
And Penji for Nonprofits has been huge. I can't suggest it enough, honestly. I've actually had the pleasure and privilege of getting to use it for two different organizations. One was a community center in Philadelphia called Northlight Community Center. And that does direct service. I was the director of development there, and we were a small organization. It provided capacity for design services. And, the talent that exists was hugely beneficial to us as an organization, and the capacity for us to grow. And then when you all partnered with CTIPP was an unfunded organization. We're still severely underfunded and trying to work on that. But, at the very beginning of when we were launching our national campaign to uplift advocate voices, we partnered with Penji for Nonprofits. And again, that design service to be able to create resources that clearly communicated really complex, ideas, and grabbed people's attention. I mean, that attention economy is huge, right? Being able to have people who lean in and want to learn more about what you're doing. I mean, you see how long this podcast takes. I might be a particularly verbose person, but what we're trying to do is relatively complex, right? And having really good design, really good support, and just friendly people that kind of understood where we were coming from in our own resource scarcity, and being able to lend, the expertise that Penji has to support growth for both organizations. I've seen it on a direct service side and indirect service side, which looks different. And Penji was able to really support both organizations through Penji for Nonprofits. And, I hope to continue to work together, as time moves on, and just appreciate the support that you've all given.
Thank you so much. That's really exactly what we aim to do. So I appreciate you saying all of that. We understand the the stress that goes on marketing departments for nonprofits specifically. A lot of them are underfunded and understaffed, and that's unfortunately the reality, which I'm sure you understand very well.
We are yet to get a grant that says for marketing. It's so it's like sometimes you can't. It's really hard, and so if that's your goal to what I shared, like, kudos and congratulations, because y'all are doing it. And I know that from leadership throughout the organization, you all really mean it. And it doesn't go unnoticed, and it's appreciated.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate hearing that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I didn't want to become, I do really care about all of the causes that I've talked to everyone about since doing this podcast. And I am happy that a company that I work for cares about these types of things, because I do, and I would be really sad if I was just working for a very capitalist, for lack of better phrasing, company that didn't care about anyone. So
having capital is awful important, but having met you a few times, Shannon, I don't know how long someone with your heart and passion for these issues would last at a company that didn't have some sort of mission for good.
I appreciate that. Well, thank you so much for coming on with me today. Again, it's great talking to you. The last chat that we had was wonderful too, and I just really resonate with your mission, and I'm so happy that someone's doing work like yours.
I appreciate that. Thank you for all the support and for giving me an opportunity to share.
I appreciate that. Well, thank you so much again for coming on. I just said that, but and that concludes our podcast. Thank you so much again, and everyone, please don't forget to like and subscribe to hear stories like this.